Hey, how's it going, guys? Thank y'all so much for tuning in and watching another video. All right, today I'm going to be speaking about my first whole deal. So this is, you probably saw a video before explaining my first non-deal, but this is the first official wholesale deal that I got, and I wanted to share the story because it was an interesting story, and there's many lessons in between as well. So before I get started, go ahead and like this video, and also subscribe to this channel so that you're notified of whenever I am posting another video. And hey, even if these videos just pop up on your feed, doesn't mean you're subscribed. So make sure you look at that subscription button and you actually click, because it does help out the channel and it helps other people that are watching these types of videos to actually see this video. So I appreciate you guys in advance. So you see the thumbnail and you see what I'm talking about. So we're talking about my first deal. All right, so I'll give you the the rundown of the story, and then just kind of let you through the entire process. So at the time when I first started, at the time I had a job that, it paid really well, and I was working about 3 to 4 weeks on, and then I'd have about like 3 or 4 days off. But the 3 or 4 weeks that are on, they're 7 days a week, 10 plus hours a day, and I'm usually like in another state, right? So I either had to drive the company car across country, or I had to fly somewhere, get a rental car, and be working out in whatever that city is for almost a month at a time. Then the time that I have off was a few days, and then, back and forth. So I wanted to wholesale, but it got to that point to where it's like, how in the world am I gonna do that? Like I'm never really home. I can cold call, but when it gets down to it, it's like how am I really gonna be consistent with speaking with these individuals? How am I gonna be consistent with my marketing? Like, how is this gonna happen? So that's why I decided to get some professional help. Shout out to Jennifer West Granahan, gave some great information, and she's the person that I got a course from her, or her mentorship, and she was able to really coach me through that process. But at the beginning, what we were talking about was basically cold calling, bandit size, and some of the things that you hear everybody speak about. But what's great about her course is that her mentorship is that she has 2 sections. One section is about the actions that you will take, but then the next is about mindset. I knew the actions to take, but my mindset was off, right? And you can watch some of my earlier videos just kind of explaining, I wasn't the best student, so there's the things of overall mindset that wasn't right. So it was like, well, at the end of this, at least I can say I tried. It was one of those situations, right? So I was going through the motion of things, but I realized that my mindset was off. So as time went on, I'm looking at my bank account. I'm like, okay, I have money, but I don't have time. I'm like, well, this is a unique position to be in, because I can just quit. I can quit the job and I can focus on what I really want to do, because what I can't do is wait until I'm married with kids and then say, hey, I'm quitting, right? So if I'm gonna be making any risky moves, that was the time. I wasn't in a relationship. I was in a relationship. But I was not married and I didn't have any kids. So it was a thing of, what am I gonna do to achieve my goals? So when it came down to it, I made the decision one day, and plus, there were some issues going on, all the politics and stuff that was going on. So I'm like, I don't need this job for where I'm going in life. This job is not gonna define me, and I don't need this. So I remember wrote up that notice that evening, expressed it with my girl, and I'm like, hey, look, I'm thinking about quitting. And a lot of situations was going on at the time, and shout out to her and her family. They really held it down for me during that space and time, because I'm like, I'm quitting. So thankfully, before I quit, I bought myself a car. So I have the company car, plus I have my car. didn't realize that once I put in that notice, they're like, oh, no, you're done today. Like, there's no 2 weeks from now, you're done today. And to me, I thought, okay, well, let me, get some other things in order. But it's like everything was done. So when I went out to get another apartment or all these things, it was like we're trying to verify your employment, but we can't verify it. So where I'm like, wait, whoa, I'm calling the employer. Yeah, you don't work for us anymore. So there's no verification of anything. You're done. I'm like, but don't y'all give some type of grace, like 2 weeks? Like, no, cut off. I'm like, whoa, okay. So just speaking to my girl, she was just like, you got to make it work. Like, this isn't like and this is before I put in that notice. She's like, hey, if you put in this notice, like, there is no halfway anything. You got to make it work, right? So I'm like, okay. So once I made that decision, it was that understanding of I better make it work because I just quit a job that paid this amount of money. I just quit a job that had these types of benefits, these types of, like, if you don't quit that job, you better make sure that this is what you want to do, and you better figure it out. So that's what ended up happening. So I'm still having this mentorship with Jennifer, and I have my girl just giving me some insight on different things I'm doing. So at this point, I'm just kind of running around just trying to figure it out. And with Jennifer, she allowed me to get my mind right. And with my girl, now wife, she gave me a different perspective of, okay, what are you doing out here to market? Okay, so I remember I was getting advice like going into Home Depot parking lots and speaking to different people in a parking lot. It's like, why would you do that? Why would you go and speak to people in a parking lot when that's not giving you a chance to speak to a large amount of people? She's like, okay, how many people are you speaking with when you cold call versus when you're just walking around in a Walmart parking lot or a Home Depot parking lot? So put yourself in a position to where you're speaking to the most amount of people versus just spinning your wheels and just doing a bunch of stuff and just being busy with no actual progression. All right, so with that, that's what I stuck to, cold calling. And I will cold call the absentee owner high equity list, a pre-foreclosure list, and the driving for dollars list is what I was working over and over and over again. I used someone on Fiverr to do the skip tracing for me because that's what I could afford. And I would just cold call. Now, when I say I'll cold call, I'm talking about Google Voice on the phone, all right? Dialing one by one, going through hundreds of people on a list like that. Like, I was like, I got to get it done. So I would be starting from early in the morning and I wouldn't get done until late at night. And of course it wasn't, cold calling all day, but it was like cold calling, break. I worked out in the morning. I would drive for dollars on Wednesday and then cold call that evening. I would do additional research. I'll create lists. I would, all these different things I was doing. That was my main thing. I'm just making sure that I'm putting myself in the best position to succeed. So every day I was just grinding because I'm like, I gotta get this, I gotta get it done. And part of what Jennifer was letting me know was like, hey, look, you have to already envision that you already got that check, right? You like, and in a way, and she didn't say this, but in a way, it's like my reality had to catch up to my manifestation, right? Which is a very beautiful way of putting that. Holy crap, that was awesome. All right, so I already envisioned that I got the deal. I already envisioned that I was gonna make $10,000 on this deal. I already envisioned that, all these things were gonna happen. And so it was just a matter of just making my reality catch up to my manifestation. I'm gonna write that down. Reality manifestation. That was beautiful. All right, so, and I'm not gonna edit that out. All right, so as that was going on, I remember just cold calling every single day. All right, and so like I said, every Wednesday is when I will cold call. Drive for dollars. So I was driving for dollars on this one day, like crazy storm, and like Houston, like I tell you what, you can sneeze and like the particles that you have in the air, once they hit the ground, Houston floods. Like, it's crazy. Like, Houston stays flooding. It is insane, right? So it's raining like crazy thunderstorm. So of course, if it's a bad storm like that, somebody's flooding. All right. So what I did is I used my it's called a first step method. So pretty much looking for properties that fit certain criteria of houses that would be distressed by now because of its age. And I will go to those neighborhoods to do my driving for dollars. So I went to one area and I'm like, these houses are a little newer than what I thought they would be. So I went across to another one that was close by. So as I'm driving through, the water starts getting a little deep in this neighborhood, right? To the point to where it's like, oh, it's not safe for me to be driving so fast, right? So it got to the point to where the water was so deep that as cars would be coming by, it would slightly lift my car a little bit as I'm driving. And I'm like, maybe I shouldn't drive fast because then the water will get in the engine. So let me just slowly drive. All right, so I'm driving up. I'm like, okay, these streets look like less water. So I drove through it. As I'm about to go on this one street, there's a guy. He's like, whoa, don't come this way. Because the way I would check how deep the water is was by looking at the mailboxes. So I noticed down one street, I didn't see any mailboxes. So I'm like, oh, maybe the street don't have mailboxes, right? That was my thought process. I'm like, because the solution isn't me not driving for dollars. The solution is not me not driving for dollars. The solution is just me driving slower. But this guy was here. He's like, bro, do not come down this way. Go back the other way. So I'm like, all right. So I back up and I go down another street. I see a house that has a lockbox on it. Doesn't look too bad, but it has a lockbox. So I'm like, whatever. I write it down. And I get that list skip traced. Cold call, and I get a hold of a guy, just like I got a hold of several other people. And like, hey, blah, blah, seeing if you had any interest in selling your home. Yeah, blah, blah, did my whole spiel. And he was like, okay, well, it's interesting that you called me because I was actually getting ready to fix it. But I mean, I could sell it the way that it is. How much would you offer? I'm like, well, based off of these numbers, boom, boom, boom. And I gave him a number. And he's like, oh, let me check with my wife. And in my mind, I'm like, here we go. Like when somebody said about to check with their wife, that means no, right? So he's like, let me check with my wife. And the wife, heard some talking. And he's like, well, all right, well, I'll get back to you. So he actually calls me back like a couple days later. He's like, yeah, I spoke to my wife. I'm like, okay. Yeah, and I mean, she's okay with it. But of course, if you're going to be going down and lowball me, then I don't want to do it. I'm like, no, that's fine. I'll just come and just confirm that it's in a condition that makes sense. And from there, I'll go ahead and make it off. He's like, okay, cool. So I went there. And so he's like, I'm down for the appointment. So I'm excited, because I'm like, all right, it's another appointment, but don't get too excited because, whatever. So I went there, talking to him, looked at the property. Okay, it's a little bit worse shape than I thought it would be, but whatever. So I already had the contract already pre-filled, right? And so I went ahead and had him sign it. He looks at it, and it's like, all right, well, he takes pictures of it. He's like, well, go ahead, you sign first. I'm like, okay, yeah, sign it. And then he signs it, and he's like, okay, cool. So what's your qualifications of these types of properties? I'm like, oh, well, what we do is and I'm just talking. Like, I'm doing my thing. I'm going in with confidence. I'm like, oh yeah, basically we just base our numbers off of what makes sense for us. There's times where we have it as rentals. Sometimes we have them as flip properties, but overall, she's like, okay. So is it like a 70 or 80%? I'm like, as far as percentages, it just all depends. Sometimes a little higher, sometimes a little lower. He's like, okay, cool. Well, what do you need from me? And I just was letting him know, like, hey, this is what we need. This is what's going to happen. And I'll meet you here within the next couple of days, or within a few more days, and we'll go from there. As far as closing, and I'll give you more instructions later on. He's like, okay. So now I'm like, I got a property under contract. Like, okay, cool. I've been there before. I've had the non-deals happen before. Whatever. This is just part of it. But hey, hopefully this one closes because we'll see. So was talking to my wife, and she's like, well, how much you gonna sell for? Well, I'm gonna sell for this amount. And I'm like, well, based off of this formula, well, how much would it be if I did, boom, 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 and I had her do the math? She's like 13,000. I'm like, I could probably make 13,000 on this deal. She was like, I mean, if that's what you're seeing. I'm like, okay, cool. So I went ahead, and of course I'm super excited. Like once I figure out how much money I could make on this, I'm running all through the house. I'm excited, man. Like it was just insane, right? But then once I put the information out there on Facebook to find some buyers, my wife, of course, she's always, making things better. So she's like, oh yeah, make a slideshow, add the music, have your logo, really get make it pretty. So I did that. And I was just getting flooded with people like, oh, I'm interested. Of course, some haters are like, oh, you're off, blah, blah. It's like, whatever. So I get all this stuff in, and then fast forward, several people say they're interested. Then I let them know when the inspection is. I go out, have the inspection, and then I get offers on the property, and I fill out the contract to assign it over to them, and it's with the title company. And it was interesting because I'm like, all right, is this real now? Because I did this step too before. Like, it's with the title company. I'm like, okay. I sent it over to Jennifer, like, hey, does this look right? Like, is this right? And she's like, yeah, it's cool. I'm like, okay, so we'll see. Because now I'm getting a little further than I've ever gone before. Like, this now is starting to feel real. And so I'm hitting up the title company, like, you guys good? Like, yeah. I'm like, you guys are good? I'm like, uh-oh. Like, what's about to happen? Like, okay, Eli, calm down. It's all good. You worked hard, or whatever. And so as time goes on, schedule closing, and the deal closes. And I get a call like, hey, how would you like to receive a check? Like, I want to come pick it up. I was like, okay, cool. Come and pick it up. And so I'll go down there to pick up this check, and that check, though I was working on manifesting 10,000, the check that I ended up picking up was a $13,000 check. And that was my first whole deal from wholesaling. And I remember at the time, they're like, oh, Eli, like my sister was asking me, my wife was asking me, like, Eli, how do you feel? I'm like, you know what? I wasn't too high. I wasn't too low. It was just like, I've been here before. I've experienced it, and I manifested. So I wasn't crazy excited. I was happy that I had this $13,000 check, but it was also a thing of, I've never had a check at that point in time that was that large. So I'm like, I can't even understand receiving a $13,000 check. Like, what does that even mean? Like you could have put $1 million on there. It's like what does this really mean? And once I took that, put it into the account, and just seeing that balance in there, like, like I did that. $13,000 at once deposited into that account, and from there it was just like, okay, this is real now. Now it's like, do it again. And so like another month and a half after that, got another check for 10,000. Then after that, got a check for 3. Then after that, I got a check for, I think it was like 8.5. And then it's like, then things start rolling in, and that's how I got. That's the story of me getting that first deal. So after that, me and my wife would give jokes saying, well, hey, you see it's raining, that means blessings are about to come, right? And so that's the story from the beginning to the end of how I got that first deal, and I never looked back. And I'm grateful for those different experiences that I've had throughout this time, because it was interesting. I'll just put it like that. But definitely I took a picture of that moment of when I got that first check, and I'll probably post it throughout this video or here or wherever it is. But it was a very, very special moment to be able to take a picture and send that to Jennifer, and she posted on her page. And this was what year? This was like what, 2018 it was. So it was like around October October something of when she was able to post that on her page. But just to kind of give you an idea from the time frame of when the day that I quit my job to the day that I actually picked up the check. So I have the dates here. August 26th is when I quit. Okay. And then October 16th is when I picked up that check. So in a span of 51 days, rolling through all the emotions, just going through all these different situations. But I was able to go from I quit my job to getting that first wholesale deal. And I'm like, this is real, full steam ahead, right? So I say all that to say, man, to motivate you guys and let you know like, hey, everybody's journey is different. But the most important thing is you cannot quit. You can't stop. You got to keep moving forward, man. And regardless of whatever is in front of you, or whatever obstacles you have, make a way for your blessings to come in. And sometimes you got to jump. I'm not telling you to quit your job. But I'm just telling you what my story was, right? And of course, my situation was different from a lot of other people. But at the end of the day, you have to do what's right for you. And I knew for me, I would never get a wholesale deal if I stayed at the job. So I'm not telling you what to do. And please, and I'm not even like insinuating to do this. I'm just letting you know what I did, all right? But just keep grinding hard, do what you gotta do. I have an ebook, Wholesaling 101, Your First Steps. The link is in that description. It gives information on how to get your first wholesale deal and what an actual transaction looks like. And I created that for that person that I was. It's like, man, what does this even look like? Like, how do I get it done? That's what the book is about. So thank y'all so much for tuning in and watching this video. I greatly appreciate y'all, and I cannot wait for y'all to get your first deal. Y'all take care.